Do you believe in Bob Huggins and the West Virginia Mountaineers, or maybe is it still a wait and see approach? Last year, really, really bad. This year, looking a lot better, but there have been some hiccups. I'm Mike Asti. That's Ethan Bock, our West Virginia basketball beat writer here. And of course, this is West Virginia Sports Now. We are going to talk some hoops. We're going to kind of reset a little bit now. We got a good chunk of games that have been played, including a tournament that Ethan actually was out there for in Portland for the PK85 for Phil Knight's birthday. And we have a Mountaineer team that at times has really made people think, okay, wow, new team, transfer portal worked, Bob Huggins adapted, this team could make a run. And then maybe there are other moments where people are still able to say, well, there's been some miscues. There's been some layups that have been missed. There's been some rebounding that hasn't been there. Bob Huggins hasn't been pleased at times, even in big wins. He's talked about not being fully pleased, not nearly being satisfied, not that he ever is. And of course, this team has lost a couple games to this point. So, Ethan, I'm going to start there. How has your opinion adapted so far this season for where we are? From what you thought entering the season to then what you saw early in the season. We covered a game. You then were out in Portland. You lose to Purdue, but Purdue looking like a real solid team, one of the better teams in the entire country, a top 5 team. You had the game at Xavier. You also were there for that. That was one of those that Xavier's good. They're not great right now based on their record. They were home. That could have been a game that West Virginia, if they would have won, they could have sold it on. This proves we're for real. It's not our staple win. We got to get better ones, but this proves that we can handle a rough place to play, get some of the conference games that are won on the road rather than just win them at home, and then go from there. But they do blow that game, and they were supposed to be the better team, even though they were in a tough place to play. So how has your opinion shifted as this season has moved along to this point?
Yeah, I think what's been consistent throughout the season, just a month in, is I'm still impressed of how the team's playing. Going into the year, I didn't expect them to be blowing out teams on the road on a neutral court, even if it's a team like Pitt winning by 25 plus, beating Florida and Portland by 29.
Pitt's looked better since that game too, honestly.
Yeah, five or six in a row, I think, at this point. So, despite what West Virginia has with the 2 losses to Purdue and Xavier not closing out the game, I think they've exceeded my expectations. I still think they're a tournament team. And in the Xavier game in the second half, obviously that was their worst half of the season. It just happened to occur at probably the biggest game of the season to this point. But that first half they had in Cincinnati was promising, and I think this is going to be a team that will compete in the middle, at least in the middle of the Big 12.
You would figure that their expectations for this team have certainly increased from the beginning of the season to now. That I'm sure even Bob Huggins to himself thinking, okay, we can do more than I maybe even thought entering the season, because there was an unknown there. I mean, last year, obviously, the season was so bad. He said, we're going to make some changes. Clearly, he's willing to now fully adapt to the portal, made some changes. Eric Stevenson comes aboard. He's basically the team leader. He's a new piece. Perez, we're going to talk later, but they're still waiting to get Perez on the floor. He's tweeting about when he's going to play, and I'm sure he's very frustrated watching these games, but he was a top scorer last year at Manhattan, so he could walk on the floor and be the leading scorer of this team, and I don't think it would be something that Bob Huggins would be too shocked about. That's why Bob Huggins has made it very clear this kid's going to get PT once he's eligible and able to get out there, and Emmett Matthews and Trey Mitchell not fully healthy. So we're still 7 or so weeks from the surgery for Trey Mitchell, and he's getting it done. So there are reasons to believe this team could make a run and should at least be a tournament team, which would be a big jump from last year, even though that wouldn't necessarily satisfy the expectations of the program, certainly under Huggins usually. And the last few years have been less than what certainly the prior decade was under Huggins. But I think that's at minimum now is what the expectations should be. You don't really know, though, until you get to conference play. Is there anything, especially from that Xavier game, and even going back earlier in the season to Morehead State and some of those games where, okay, if they don't get this cleaned up, it could actually still get really bad in conference play? Because to be fair to the detractors out there that are saying, hey, there's a couple losses. I'm not ready to be too happy about this team right now. That Big 12 schedule is going to be a gauntlet. Auburn's coming up, even though that's at home. But Kansas, Texas, Texas Tech, Baylor, a recent national champ, it will not be easy. And yeah, they should win some. They're going to lose some, but they could lose them all if they don't fix certain things that Huggins is still clearly upset on, because I believe the exact quote was earlier in the year, even when they were undefeated and beating teams by 30 points, you mentioned the backyard brawl win by 30, that we're beating teams because we're better. We're not really playing well. If that continues, that's going to be a major problem. But what is that exactly? What are they not doing well that crept up at the end of the Xavier game that could have been a big win?
Yeah, I think with both Purdue and the Xavier losses, it comes down to rebounding and allowing both teams to have second chance opportunities. Bob Huggins today actually said the rebounding's horrible. I mean,
Right.
I'm expected for him to say that, but it is
Yeah.
actually pretty bad. It's way better than last year. Last year was like,
I mean, the bar wasn't that high, but
yeah, the bar wasn't that high. It's way better than last year, but it's still
Yeah.
it still has room to improve on, and I think they
Yeah.
can improve on it before Big 12 play. Another thing, I'm not going to criticize Bob Huggins. He's a Hall of Fame coach, but there's been multiple times where guys will have 4 fouls with 6, 7 minutes left in the game. Trey Mitchell, both
This is brought
games.
up. Yeah.
Trey
Bob
Mitchell,
Huggins
both
critics will
games.
bring this up. I mean, he's not perfect. He's a Hall of Fame
Yeah.
coach, but he's not perfect. You got to be fair to criticize. Yeah.
Yeah, both games to Purdue and Xavier, Trey Mitchell had 4 fouls with 6, 7 minutes to go, and Huggins didn't put him in for the rest of the game. I understand not wanting to get him fouled out, but not putting him in with like 2 minutes left to at least have another offensive threat on the floor. Like,
Yeah.
if he fouls out, he fouls out. Like, he's already at 4 fouls, so it's not like
Yeah.
he can't play the next game if he gets fouled out. So
Yeah, it's not college football rules.
yeah, it's not.
Right.
He didn't get called for targeting.
Yeah,
But
right. This isn't targeting. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's PTSD on the flip side of benefiting from that happening to an opponent, just for the fact that in the backyard brawl, people remember Nelly Cummings fouled out with about 7.5 minutes left in that game. He's now really emerged. You mentioned them winning 5 or 6 in a row. It's really because Nelly Cummings has become that legit point guard for them, like he was at Colgate. He wasn't really impactful at all in the backyard brawl. If you put this Nelly Cummings and the way Pitt's playing now with Ugley back, etc., against West Virginia again, if they would play again, I know a lot of Pitt fans think that game would be a lot closer, and people thought it'd be close entering that game. So it now is looking like a better win than it was at the time. But maybe he's thinking that, okay, that happened to them. We end up winning by 30 because their point guard fouled out. I don't want it to happen to us, because the game can just completely unravel if you lose a key cog. But yeah, that's been brought up. Not even just players in foul trouble, though. There have been people to also bring up issues with timeouts at the end of games, that he does call the traditional timeout basically to just yell at you, but it doesn't appear there's much strategy in these final minutes. And it almost comes across, and I'm not going to accuse this, but some of the comments he makes comes across this way as well, that Bob Huggins is sitting there, obviously hadn't had a home game, hadn't played at Xavier in 17 years it was since he's back at Cincinnati. The vitriol that he was still facing from the Xavier fans, he clearly not a fan of them still, so that rivalry is still connected. And it almost came across like he was saying, okay, squad, you're going to blow this. I'm going to let you blow it, and then I'm going to throw it back at you later, and I want you to have this lesson that's learned of what could happen if you blow it. Any credence to any of that maybe his clock management and timeouts have not been utilized to its fullest, to its best, separate from even foul trouble?
yeah,
Because they've been at the end of the game has been an issue. They have faded
Yeah.
at the end of games. Even in games they ended up still winning, they had to hang on in games that they should have secured bigger wins, and then you do have the big wins earlier. But
I think it just comes down to the flow of the game. I think when you have bigs like Jimmy Bell, James Okongwu, Muhammad Wagi, you have to be careful with just what kind of situations you're going to put all three of those in, because all three are very experienced at the Power 5 level.
right.
This is Jimmy Bell's first true chance at the Power 5 level. Wagi's, it's his first year in Division I college, and Okongwu's coming into his second year, barely playing last year. So with the front court depth that I've been worried about pretty much all off season, it's starting to show at some points. I'm not entirely worried yet. But I think that's why late in the games the team just gets exhausted because the guards they have 5, 6 guards that they can throw out there at the end of the game, and they all have great impact. But when it comes to the front court, some of those guys like Jimmy Bell was gassed in the Xavier game. He did all he could do, scoring 12 points, 5 for 5 shooting, guarding Jack Nunji the entire game.
Yeah.
For the most part, he did a great job. But towards the end of the game, he was gassed. So I think just managing the lineups at the end of the game is what the team's going to have to get used to, especially when you're literally 13, 14 players deep. So it's a good problem for them.
Yeah, this is a much deeper West Virginia team. This is much more of a team that plays together. I think there's more chemistry there, which is weird to say. These guys haven't played together that many games, but it does feel like there's more of a team here than last year. It was just a bunch of players in the court trying to do something, and I think that was what Bob Huggins was annoyed by. This feels more like a Huggins team. Whenever he does have a solid year, he gets players that are just kind of willing to be coached by him, respect him to a certain level, and then play together. There's not really the legit star the teams of the past maybe have had. There's not a Javon Carter or Deuce McBride in recent memory. Certainly not a Sean Butler. Really, Eric Stevenson maybe is that guy that could become that guy in a deep run. But Ethan Bock, Mike Asti here, WV Sports Now. That is our coverage. Head over to all of the WVSN properties for Ethan's coverage of the basketball team, our coverage of West Virginia athletics overall. Is that also maybe something that could hold this team back in terms of, we talked about this before the season, does somebody need to emerge to take over the mantle as the best player on that team? Is that player still that we're waiting to see in Perez? Is Perez maybe going to be that guy, or will that be hard for him to do because he is coming in now mid-season? And is it that while they play together and they can get hot at times, do they have enough scoring? Because you have to understand that, yeah, they have tons of scoring comparison to last year, but do they have enough scoring and enough of shooting to be able to actually make a tournament run separate from last year? And do they need somebody to step up?
I think what I've learned in the first month is they don't need an offensive go-to guy. Like, they don't need a Javon Carter, Deuce McBride, Deshaun Butler. Okay. They just need to identify the leader, and they already have with Eric Stevenson.
Yeah, it feels like it's him, right?
It's Eric Stevenson. So you have Stevenson, Emmett Matthews, Trey Mitchell, Joe Toussaint. Those guys for sure are give them the ball and see if they can go get a basket. They have 4 guys that can score at the end of a game. Have they identified who that player is yet? No. But Eric Stevenson's the leader, so just go with it for now. As far as the offense goes, I think they're doing fantastic. I did not expect this at all.
Yeah.
I actually expected them to be terrible on offense. I'm not
really.
I'm not
okay.
going to lie. Terrible.
Okay. Yeah, I mean 74, 84, 89, 68, 92, 75, 81, 76. Only one game are they under 70. They're over 80 in most of these games. Then you obviously have the big one there at 92. I mean, yeah, they put up some points, but it could even be more.
They're also shooting 38% from 3 as well.
Right. Which yeah. Again, going back to last year, and this is the transfer portal, so you can kind of fix things. And they have rebounded well in some of these games when Bob Huggins was upset about the rebounding. I think he wants more because of the size of some of these players, that he feels like they should even be giving more. That's what you'll learn about Huggins, that even if you have numbers that are good, if he feels that you can even give more, he's not going to compliment you. Like if you're the 3rd best player in the world, but he thinks you should be the 1st and you should be the best player in the world, he's gonna be sitting there saying, well, could be more. So that's just Bob Huggins. That's just how he is here. Again, Ethan Bock, Mike Asti. What kind of impact is Perez going to make on this team, though? Because he appears to be this mythical creature that people who followed college basketball, they might be aware of 19 points a game in Manhattan and a traditional non-football, it's basketball or nothing else type of program there. He ends up at West Virginia, and you wrote about this in kind of surprising circumstances. I don't think that was his plan at all. His head coach ends up getting fired. He's really upset about that. There's a connection between Huggins and his coach, and 38 missed calls later, he finally calls Bob Huggins back and ends up now on the roster of a Basketball Hall of Famer, but he is not yet eligible There's still a question mark on when exactly he'll be eligible. If he's not eligible until Big 12 play, I don't think that's really a big deal for this team because they do have a schedule here prior to getting into the Big 12. They should be able to clip off some more wins. They should be able to go into the new year with only those 2 losses. And those 2 losses aren't really bad ones. You mentioned Xavier, good. Should probably be a tournament team if they can keep this moving. And Purdue, one of the better teams in the whole country, in one of the better conferences in the country, along with the Big 12. So it'll be hard in conference play, but they could do without him until then. But once they get him back, once they have Perez on the floor, what impact can he have? How is that going to change the dynamic of this team? Is there a chance that that's going to actually hurt the pecking order here? Is he going to fall in line right under Stevenson and everything will be fine? Or if he's getting hot and it's 25-point night from him that nobody else really seemingly can put up, is Huggins going to keep going to him and he's going to end up becoming the leader of this team if they make a run? He's an unknown factor out there that I feel like could go either way, but it could be a wild card that really swings them into why some people think this actually could be a Sweet 16 team, if not more. But that's hard to say when you haven't seen him on the floor with any of these guys yet, and this team has already lost without him.
Yeah, I mean, he can't practice with them. He can't play games with them. He can't even shoot around with them.
So it's hard to really know. But
yeah,
what do you think?
I think Bob Huggins will honestly bring him off the bench as a 6th man, kind of like what Joe Toussaint's doing right now.
Right.
Just have another guy off the bench who can get a basket. That doesn't, just because he's off the bench doesn't mean he's not going to not be important. He's going to have the exact same role as Joe Toussaint, where he's going to be on the floor at the end of games. Obviously, their team's so deep that they could have 6, 7, 8 guys off that roster that could finish games. So maybe Perez doesn't. I'm not sure yet. But what I can confirm and guarantee is he will be able to get baskets for West Virginia.
You can confirm that? Are you comfortable?
I can confirm that. He's a bucket getter.
Yeah.
But I think the beauty of this team really is, it's cliche, and I'm going to say this all year. It's cliche, but they all just want to win as a team this year. They're all 4-year, 5-year seniors. They're really unselfish. You can tell just by watching them.
That's why Stevenson, I think, has become the leader of this team. He is so unselfish, and it almost appears like he wants to just have a winning season under Bob Huggins and make a tournament run. Like that's his main focus right now, and that's just what it appears. So that I think is why he has really emerged as the guy.
And I think Perez is going to get in line with the rest of them, and I think he's unselfish too. It sounds like off my phone call with him in October, it sounds like he just wants to win. He just wants to make the most out of his final season of college. So I think he's going to be a great addition. I would be shocked if he actually hurt the team in some way. I don't know how adding a preseason player of the year would be a bad thing. So I would be shocked if it actually hurt the team and hurt the chemistry, hurt the depth. So
I don't think there's any way that it hurts them. It's not like I'm saying he's going to get out there on the floor and all of a sudden be a cancer in the locker room and just not hitting any shots. He's a bucket getter. He's going to be hitting some shots. Even if he comes off the bench, the more shots he hits, the more minutes he's going to get. And we've seen Bob Huggins tinker a starting 5 every game for 3 months in a row at one point. So if he's getting you buckets and you're seeing 15 points off the bench and the team's not really winning by as much as Bob Huggins thinks they should win, or they don't win, because we've also have examples again of Bob Huggins feeling like they haven't played as well as they can despite picking up some W's. Wouldn't put it past Bob Huggins to throw him in the starting lineup. It's not going to happen right away. He's going to make him earn it, but by tournament time, certainly by the Big 12 tournament, that could certainly happen. Or he may try to spice things up at the end of the game. You might have somebody in Perez, Ethan, and maybe interested in your thoughts on this. We talked about the top of the show here on how the end of games has been a problem for West Virginia, win or lose this season, outside of, say, big wins in Morehead State in the backyard brawl. Is it possible that even though Stevenson is a solid shooter, that maybe he's not the sniper of Perez, and maybe Perez could also maybe help increase these leads at the end of games, getting a lot of minutes at the end of games, or even on the flip side, he could be a player that if you're down by 6 with 40 seconds left, he can hit a couple outside shots real quick that maybe somebody else doesn't have the efficiency to be able to do as successfully. Like that extra piece that is another guy that can do it, or maybe even with more efficiency based on his past numbers in his career. He's even more efficient. He has a better points per game. Maybe he could be that other piece that it also can make it easier. Okay, you can't, you got to key on 2 or 3 guys rather than just 1 or 2. now. That end of game problem for West Virginia on either side of the coin possibly could be fixed with Perez, if nothing else. Even if he doesn't become a 20-point per game scorer, that end of game problem could be fixed with him.
Yeah, I think this team has a lot of guys who can be that number one option. Trey Mitchell at one point looked like number one option. Eric Stevenson right now, I think, looks like the number one option. Joe Toussaint scores a team high, I think, of 18 points against Pitt. So he's had games where he's scoring almost 20 a game. So he could actually be a go-to guy. He was the only guy scoring at the end of the Xavier game. So when you add Perez, I think this team just should exponentially get more better. And his numbers at Manhattan shooting wise aren't that great, but that's because he has to shoot all the time.
Yeah, right.
He's the only guy that could make a basket on their team, realistically. So his 18, 19 points per game is great, but when you look at his shooting percentage, he's not going to shoot 30% from three at West Virginia because he won't be taking a high volume amount of shots.
Okay.
Everybody's going to have a close to an even amount of shots compared to Perez taking 19 shots per game. So I think with him bringing him on, potentially closing out games, it just gives Bob Huggins another closer. And like I said, I can't see how it ends up being a bad thing.
Yeah, and Bob Huggins is going to find a way to make sure it's not a bad thing and how it ends up working out for them. And it's also a player that, while we're trying to figure out what impact he could make, and so will the team at one point, the opponents, they're not going to fully know either. So especially when you get into Big 12 play, they're going to be scheming against the Mountaineers, and then they're going to be sitting there saying, well, yeah, we schemed against this team. Add Perez.
It's almost
throwing your hands
similar,
up in the air.
It's almost similar to when Oscar entered the portal 2 years ago, and then Bob Huggins has to bring Jalen Bridges into the starting lineup. Barely played before Tshiebwe left. Yeah. So then they have this whole new four out lineup with Derek Culver at the 5, and you don't know how they're going to play. And they played totally different from when they had Tshiebwe and Culver.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, Bob Huggins is not in any way against going into the new year with a whole new mentality on how this team's going to play the best. So that could definitely change, and he could see Perez on the floor and switch things up. Or maybe he won't be impressed, and he'll have him just be a closer. He'll keep him on the bench. I'm sure if anything feels like it's rocking a boat, he'll go off Perez, because he's also seen this team play well together without Perez, even though they have now lost a couple games. So this team is, I feel like, played better than expectations. Certainly yours, certainly mine, certainly a lot of people's already this season, even though maybe you want to have the Xavier game back. I think that's why some people are hesitant. I think that Xavier game stings. Number one, their fans are on Twitter. Their fans are at the arena. They're saying some things to Bob Huggins. You're hearing the DUI chants. It was like it was 20 years ago, probably, for him, and some memories. I'm sure his family didn't love it. To have them walk out with a win and you blew it, that I'm sure that stung the Huggins family a little bit. And the players care about the Huggins family, and it wasn't a good vibe. They had already lost a few games prior to West Virginia, so it's not like this is an undefeated, really solidly ranked Xavier team. That one stings. The Purdue game you can chalk up to they have a ginormous player and they're a top 5 team in the country. The Xavier game, I think, does give that I think is the hesitation for some people. But I'll ask this one of two ways here as we close up the show. And we wanted to get kind of a mid-season reset, kind of our thoughts on what's happened to this point here. There's still some games to go before conference play. Certainly we're into early December right now, so there's more of this year to go. This team has been winning. This team has had a couple losses. Perez is going to join. Seems like players have stepped up and kind of fit their roles. We keep also emphasizing, and so is Huggins, that Trey Mitchell, not really probably fully who he's going to be at the end of the season. It almost feels like, Ethan, though, that if this team could stay together somehow, and I know they don't have the eligibility for everybody, but if they could stay together next year, they could really be scary, because they're finally developing chemistry. Perez is going to be joining the squad. He'll then have games under his belt. Trey Mitchell's going to play half the season, not fully healthy, according to Huggins. It almost feels like if they don't make a run, it's going to be a what if story.
Yeah, what if he... This, not to get off topic, but that's the beauty of the transfer portal, because you can bring back Joe Toussaint, you can bring back Trey Mitchell. So what do, you just retool in the transfer portal again in the
true.
offseason like they did
Yeah.
this year. So that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, and I'd imagine he's willing to do that. Yeah. But if it ends up working out for West Virginia and they do make a run, number one, what would that have to look like? What do you think this team should reach with the potential of this team from what you've seen on the floor, what you know about Perez, what can happen with this team once everyone gets healthy and gels together? Where do you think this team should go? Is there a bar for you, especially with only one tournament win for the program in the last 5 years? That doesn't feel, that's in 2018. That doesn't feel great for the program, even though it's nothing on these kids. Like, what's the bar this team has to get? What's going to get them there? What do they do to get there? And then if this falls in a direction nobody wants to be and the wheels do fall off and they lose a lot of these conference games and this team doesn't go anywhere, even when you do add Perez, what probably happened to have that be a season that once again is another forgettable season for the Mountaineers? Because we have seen teams start out, last year was just all kinds of bad, but we have seen teams even 2 years ago start out really strong, have a couple of losses only going to the new year, people saying, oh, they keep this up, they're going to be ranked for sure, or getting ranked, or flirting with rankings, being right there. You mentioned they were 26, 27 in some serious rankings, like right outside. They're getting some top 25 votes. Then you lose to Xavier, and those really aren't going to happen as often. And in those years, then they would just totally fade. Last year, multiple 7-game losing streaks kind of ruined the year. So if that happens again, then how did that occur?
Yeah, I think right now, going into as we wrap up non-conference play, I think this team's in a great position. There's no bad team in the Big 12. Everybody knows this. They're a 10 deep conference.
Yeah.
I do think they can beat a few of those teams in the conference twice. There's teams in that conference I think they can beat 1 out of 2 times. And then there's teams like Kansas and Baylor where there's a good chance that they probably won't beat them either time. So I see them in the middle of the pack of the Big 12, and I really don't I don't see it getting bad for them. But if it does happen to be like last year where they're losing 7 games multiple times, then in the offseason they're going to have to really adjust how they recruit in the transfer portal. I think this experiment has gone great for Bob Huggins and his staff so far.
Right.
I think all West Virginia fans should be happy, especially after what happened last year. Everybody was criticizing Huggins and his staff for not getting with the times. He did. They did. They brought in one of the best transfer classes in the country. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But what they've learned is the new way of college basketball, and they know now how to win. They've beat Power 5 programs already this year. They've competed with top teams in the country. I would be shocked if they go 4-14 and finish 10th in the Big 12 again. But it's always a possibility. Big 12 stacked. But as of right now, I see them middle of the pack, 5th, 6th in the conference. I think.
What does that look like tournament? Because you say they're a tournament team then.
Yeah.
What does that look like seeding wise? Are they an 8 seed?
Yeah.
10 seed?
Right now I have a ceiling of a 6 or a 5 seed. If they really if they can steal a Baylor, Kansas game, Texas, I see a ceiling of a 5 or 6 seed. And then floor, honestly, I don't see them missing the tournament right now. So I think their floor is the first or the last 4 in Dayton as like a 12 seed.
And then is there a bar for you, just as somebody who's now been covering this team a while, just for the program in general and what you've seen out of this team? Again, we don't know with the wild card of Perez that if they do get in, regardless of seeding, is it just matchups you got to wait for? Because it really is, to be fair, that is what March Madness is about. It a lot of time is about matchups, but is getting in as a 6 seed and losing right away, or getting in as a 6 seed and winning 1 tournament game, or getting in as an 8 seed and losing right away or winning 1 tournament game? Like, does this team need to get to a second weekend to quiet the doubters, even for Huggins to give you the belief that he has fully guided the ship back to where it should be? Because it's 3 or 4 years going to a little down for West Virginia basketball, even though he's basketball Hall of Famer. He has the track record that, say, Neil Brown doesn't have, but something eventually would have to give. Not that they're ever going to move on from Huggins if they don't start at least making runs in March. Could this be a team that makes a run in March? And should fans expect this team to win a game in March, or should they be happy with this major turnaround, with the understanding of the transfer portal and having to look year to year because this team could look totally different and will look totally different next season.
Yeah, I'm patient. My bar is the NCAA tournament because I didn't
Okay.
during the offseason, just looking at their roster on paper, I didn't expect them to compete for a tournament bid. I thought it'd be a little bit similar like last year, maybe NIT appearance. Through 8 games, they're a tournament team in my eyes. Um, Changed very quickly, honestly. Like I can tell that these guys are really bought in. From a fan's perspective, though, like West Virginia fans aren't patient. I know that.
Yeah.
So I know they're going to expect a Sweet 16 appearance, or it's going to be a disappointing
You
year.
keep hearing that Sweet 16 number that's thrown out there. I think that's kind of the barometer of if Huggins has a quality good year in his career. People only like to be fair, when you're a basketball Hall of Fame head coach and you've been to so many Sweet 16, Elite Eights, a couple of Final Fours, it is fair to say that Bob Huggins probably won't be inviting a first round tournament loss to any type of Bob Huggins retirement ceremony as quickly as he would a Final Four team. So, like, you do want to get in there and win some games in March to have it be one of those Huggins teams that'll get talked about.
Yeah, I think they can win games in March just off of only 8 games. It's way too early.
It is very early.
It's December 6th. So
Right. That is when we're
but if
recording this.
if March Madness started today, they got their bid. Joe Lenardi had them at an 8 seed. I think they can win a game in March.
Fair. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and honestly, to be fair, that would be a major turnaround from last year. And I do think that even if they get in the NCAA tournament, even though people don't want to hear this, I kind of am where you are. I think if they get in the NCAA tournament, as long as they don't just totally go in the toilet in conference play, and as long as they stabilize and you add Perez, they're going to be dangerous. I don't think anyone really wants to play them. But if they get in the NCAA tournament, then it's going to be really hard to say that this offseason was not a major success for West Virginia based on the year earlier. Bob Huggins now willing to adapt to the portal. You don't know if it's going to work out for you when you go to the portal because a lot of this is unknown. I don't think anyone can guarantee you Perez is going to work out and be what they think he's going to be. But this program clearly is willing to take chances like on Perez. I mean, to call a kid 40 times that you know is probably not playing for you until January, that shows you that you're willing to take a risk. You're willing to take a risk. You're willing to, you're a Hall of Famer and you're calling a kid 30 plus times.
I mean, look at the guys that they've went after. Eric Stevenson, 4 schools, Trey Mitchell. This is his 3rd school. Dealt with playing out of position at Texas. So, and then you bring back Emmett Matthews. Just all the transfers that they've got, they all have something to prove, and they all have a grudge, and they all have something that they want to achieve all as a team this year, and kind of get back on that national level.
And I think that's why Bob Huggins, I think, likes him. He won't admit this. It comes off like he's being hard on them, and he is. But I think it comes across to me like he secretly likes these kids, and he wants them to play well, but he also wants them to kind of, shove the middle finger at all these other programs that either use them improperly or kind of usher them out the door, etc. He's mentioned he didn't think Trey Mitchell was playing in the right system for him where he was before. I mean, he was basically throwing shade at where he was before because people would ask, well, why are you not getting the same? Why is it different? Well, it's a different system. He wasn't, now he's not fully healthy, but we can unlock him and he can be so much more when he gets healthy. That wasn't the right system for him. So Huggins knows the expectations and the I think he knows the potential of this team. He probably knows the potential of this team more than we know the potential of this team. He probably thinks that if everything goes right, this team could be playing into late March. But things got to go right. Nothing is a guarantee. I do think it's fair now to say, though, when you've seen enough of this team now, that I'm going to set the bar personally that they got to get in the NCAA tournament for me. Not to say that the offseason would have been a failure otherwise, because the same moves should have been made and would have been made. And, it's easy to say that looking back. Like, when the football team added JT Daniels, everyone was saying that was why they were going to have a great year. That didn't work out, but it's not if you go back and say they shouldn't have done it. Everybody wanted them to go get a veteran quarterback. They did. It just didn't work out. You don't know if this is going to work out. But when you have this type of start, and you're probably going into January, 12-2, and you have your first couple conference games are not Kansas and Baylor. You should be able to win the first few of them. So you're going to go into those with a couple conference wins. You might go into Kansas Baylor in that gauntlet streak, maybe 15-2, 14-3, something wild like that, he could. Then, I mean, you obviously would really be fading to not get a tournament right out of that, or at least get in the NCAA. So when you look at the schedule, I think setting the bar that this team got to get into March Madness is very reasonable. I think
they have to get 18 wins. I think that's the magic number again. It's like last year.
Right. And I think that's obtainable. I think that is an obtainable number looking at this schedule. I do think that they need to clip off wins before conference play, which should happen, but that's how you get that comfort, is clipping off those wins and, the Auburn game, etc. So you never know. Well, Ethan, we wanted to do one of these to kind of reset the tone. The schedule hasn't allowed us to do a post-game show because back on East Coast time, I didn't want to be up at 3 a.m. and different Wi-Fi issues. We weren't able to bring one to you guys. So I wanted to kind of reset where the season is, talk what's to come a little bit here coming up. Obviously, there are some games coming up here on the schedule very, very soon, assuming they win those and then go into conference play. You got the addition of Perez. You got a lot of things with this team that can change while this team has shown you reasons to believe to this point, but also there absolutely are reasons to take pause. And Bob Huggins, there's reasons why he's not popping any champagne right now. He certainly has some things that need cleaned up. You mentioned rebounding. You mentioned end of games, maybe even himself and how he's handling the team foul trouble wise. So we're going to do more of these, but as we close up the show, Ethan, you mentioned you're not going to give a prediction in terms of a tournament run, and this is still very, very early, but just anything at all. Do you have a hot take? I'm curious if we can get an Ethan. Can we get a Bock bomb? Do you have anything out there that you want to bring out the holster of an individual player, of what this team's going to do, of a win you see going to happen? Maybe it can be negative. Can I get a Bock bomb?
Yeah, I think. I mean, it's not entirely a hot take, but I do think they can beat Kansas or Baylor this year, or Texas. I think they could even. Out of the 6 games of the top 3 of Baylor, Kansas, and Texas, I think they could steal 2 out of 6, and that would be incredible. Okay. Those are top 10 teams in the country. Yeah. I know that's a really low bar to say.
Yeah, 2 out of 6. I don't know if that's a bar. I don't know if it's a hot take.
But
if you go 3, I thought you were going to go 3.
For what it was last year, right. I think any West Virginia fan would take 2 out of 6 wins over the 3 of Baylor, Kansas, and Texas.
Can they be on the road, or are you talking about 2 at home?
Oh yeah, I'm saying they win 1 on the road.
Win 1 on the
Either
road.
Austin, okay. Lawrence, or Waco.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, and that's if you do that, coupled with figuring you're going to clip off some wins before the new year, and figuring you should at least be middle of the pack and beat a lot of the other teams, maybe home and away, you could exceed 18 wins. I mean, if things go right, you could get a 20-win season out of this, which would be an incredible turnaround from how bad it was last year off the portal for a coach who admittedly wasn't a fan of the portal right away, doesn't still like the travel issue that West Virginia got going on. The tournament was in Portland. They're in West Virginia. Obviously, the Big 12 is already a travel mess. And he made a whole career of doing it where you go to the JUCO route or you get a 3-star. You don't even look at 5s. You're not at a blue blood. It's hard to get those guys, and you basically mold them for 2 or 3 years. And then in that senior year, Deshaun Butler, for example, he becomes a team leader and you could really make a Final Four run. This is different. He didn't even know these kids a year ago, and he wants this group to make a run. So he's willing to adjust that way, but to turn it around and have that type of year and do what you're saying, that would be a big deal.
In my defense, it's not that much of a hot take, but if I said this a month ago, it would be a great hot take.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't care. Beating 2 out of the 6 games between Baylor, Texas, and Kansas, even now, would do wonders for their resume. And I'd be very surprised if they were able to achieve that and beat top teams on the road.
Yeah, and honestly, if they go through the season, beat everybody they should beat some teams that are kind of equal with, win out of conference games, do okay in the Big 12 and in the tournament, win a game or 2, and you lose to the top 10 teams in the country, even if you lose both times to those teams, you still probably can get 18 wins. You're still probably making an NCAA tournament out of it. It could happen. And that's still a pretty solid year. But if you get a couple of those, it could really swing into a special year. And I think if what everything we're saying and what people are maybe dreaming, or even really now should expect, if things go right And we've already seen a lot go right, even though they have lost games and need to improve on certain things. But if this ends up being a successful season, certainly off last year's turnaround, I guess I'll leave you with this. This would not only show Bob Huggins himself that the transfer portal, and I think he already realizes this, can be a major benefit, no longer an annoyance to him like it was, but now can also be a major benefit and an asset. He can walk into a room and say, I am a basketball Hall of Famer. Come play for me. I'll make you better. I'll get you to the NBA. Because in addition to this team, he can also show some kids, hey, there's Javon Carter, who's starting on a contending team and scoring 30 plus. So, and you got other stars, holding him into that high esteem right now. So that all helps Bob Huggins. And I think all of this could lead to having more success in the portal. That if a kid right now who's a junior or a sophomore is unhappy, and he sees Eric Stevenson in his 5th year turn it around, become more of a star, and make some money in Europe because of Bob Huggins, and gets himself in the NCAA tournament, and he's crying in the podium for Bob Huggins, that kid might be much more interested in playing for Bob Huggins, whereas 2 years ago, they might have thought he's a Hall of Famer, I respect him, but maybe his career is kind of waning down. I don't know if I want to go run a treadmill every Sunday. I want to watch some NFL games, etc. This might help convince them to come aboard. I mean, this is like a sales pitch. What's going on with West Virginia as a team, plus what's happening in the NBA. This is like a sales pitch for Bob Huggins that he's not. It doesn't appear like he's retiring anytime soon. You came on a show last year and told me that if this happened again, you wouldn't be shocked if Bob Huggins just goes and retires and says, once I get voted in the Hall of Fame, I'm done. It feels like now he's in the Hall of Fame, but he doesn't appear like he's trying to quit anytime soon. He's just going to keep on going because he seems to be enjoying himself. Even if he's criticizing the team, he seems to be in this. It's like he's bought in too.
I think this season was really critical for Bob Huggins. Just for him to go out into the transfer portal, try something new.
Yeah,
it really does wonders, because you don't see many coaches actually praising the transfer portal at his age.
Right.
A lot of coaches like Roy Williams, Coach KJ Wright, they've all left the game. And so if they didn't have a great year this year, and there's potential they could maybe not have a great year. I think they will, but if going into this year they had a bad year, why would he want to come back and keep recruiting from the transfer portal?
Right.
Why wouldn't he just retire like Jay Wright, Coach K, Roy Williams? But he loves the game that much, so as long as he's happy, he's going to be in the game.
I mean, it is an annoyance. I mean, the Oscar Tshiebwe situation is an annoyance. I mean, I think Bob Huggins is still a little upset about it. So, like, I mean, that's an annoyance. That's the negative of the portal. But there is a positive of the portal that could allow a quick turnaround, like you're seeing now. You mentioned the age. I think the only one that I'll drop that's similar. It's in our region. It's in our network. I'm kind of surprised that Keith Dambrot at Duquesne was as willing to go to the portal, totally fix everything. He's been very against the portal. He's been, kind of that old school mentality, but he dipped in. That's working out for Duquesne. That's a little lower level situation, but they're clipping off wins as a mid-major. So it's worked out for, I think, really, unless this falls completely off the rails, I don't think Bob Huggins is going to regret going in the portal, even if they don't win a tournament game. I don't think he's going to regret going in the portal. I think he likes these kids. I think they're playing well. They're playing for him. They're willing to be coached. I think he's having fun in a way, and they already kind of are better than what people thought.
No matter what happens, they'll just go out into the portal again. See if you can get better guys.
Go back in the portal. Yeah. 100%. And maybe you will be able to. Maybe this is the blueprint that you'll be able to bring better guys in. This is also a blueprint that maybe can help convince other guys to come aboard. So I think all those things are positives. But again, you can't be blowing games like you did at Xavier. You do need to pad a resume. You do need to have a resume matter. You don't want to be a 7 seed if you have the potential to be a 4 seed. I mean, all these things do exist. I think it's kind of what Bob Huggins is trying to communicate to his team. And you don't want to have spurts where you are missing back-to-back layups on consecutive possessions, and then your third possession in, you're chucking a 3 from almost mid-court. That happened against Morehead State. Like, you won big, but that's where Bob Huggins is trying to say, we're winning big, but I'm not thrilled, because that shouldn't happen. You do that against Kansas, you do that against Baylor, against Texas, it's going to be a long day at the office. And as much as 2 out of 6, I think, would be a solid output in those games, certainly as long as you get the other ones that are victories in conference play, if your losses are by 20 some points, that's not going to create a positive vibe either. I think that even if they don't win, even if they lose them all, and they still get in the tournament as an 8 or 9 seed, but they beat everybody else, but they lose all the top 10 teams, I think fans want to see them be competitive in those games. I don't think they want to see, and that's the Xavier annoyance. They were in that game all the way through, and you end up with about a 10-point loss because 2 points, you're outscored 14-2, something like that at the end. That, I think, is why the negativity existed on Twitter after that game. That felt like
that's the only 4 minutes of the entire season they haven't been competitive.
That's true,
They've
though.
been
100%.
competitive the entire all
even Purdue
minutes up to even Purdue.
Right.
They weren't Purdue wasn't ever blowing them out. They had a sizable 10-point lead.
Right.
But West Virginia cut it down to 4 points within a couple minutes. So
yeah.
The only time they didn't play competitive against anybody was against Xavier in the final 4 minutes. That's it.
And maybe because Purdue's a tournament, so maybe it's part of this is a team that hasn't played together, even though they're veterans. Some are not veterans, and maybe the emotions, because you even saw what they were putting on Twitter and even watching the game and what they were experiencing with the fans. Maybe they might not admit this, but maybe they let the emotions of what was going on there get to them, and maybe it was a very tough environment. So maybe even though it wasn't a good day, maybe that experience could help them in Lawrence or in Waco, because that's going to happen again. And if they can't handle road environments that are tough, that you're going to have some rowdy fans chanting some things that you think are disrespectful, then they're going to get potentially blown out or lose those games as well. But so maybe chalk that up. I'm sure that's what Huggins is trying to teach. That was a learning experience. It's a tough place to play. You could have won. They're not really better than you, but they did win because you didn't handle it well at the end. If we now learn what to do to handle it better later on, we could put forth the Ethan Bock plan and win some of those games, and then really have the vibes all be positive, finally unanimously back around the basketball program, as West Virginia University right now is trying to become a basketball school. So that we give them the rest of the final year trying to become a basketball school. So maybe that's glass half full. That it was a tough place to play. It was a bad night. Yeah, they imagine if they would have beat Purdue. Could have done it.
Yep.
It'd make the Xavier loss maybe sting more, but imagine if they didn't blow it against Xavier and they beat Purdue. We'd be talking about like a top 15 team in the country right now. That's how close that could be to the situation. So Ethan Bock, our men's basketball beat writer here at WVSN, of course, follow him on Twitter for the Bock Bombs. And more of those. And then also for all of his coverage at WV Sports Now, I'm Mike Asti. This Mountaineer team still has a lot of season to go, a lot of pressure yet to try to handle. The wild card of Perez, I think, is an interesting thing that basketball fans around the country are kind of waiting to figure out. Let me put it to you this way. No matter how this season finishes, Ethan, I think you agree with this, and certainly as someone who covered this team last year as well on a beat, no matter how this season finishes, because nothing is guaranteed at all. It could go one way, it could go the other. A lot more intriguing than last year. A lot more reason to be excited and to be wanting to go to these games and to be happy about it and to have a lot of fun around this team, and this team given a vibe that they're having fun. They weren't really on Twitter last year because they knew what they were going to see there. Negativity. They were sucking. They're out there. Like, the players are having fun. The fans are more into it. There's reason to believe, and there's more intrigue around this team, especially as we go into a new year, than probably the last 2 years. And that's thanks to the portal. That's thanks to Bob Huggins adapting to the portal. So if you're a Bob Huggins hater, you got to find something new. Then he won't get to the modern times and get to the portal, because that was the whole debate last year. We didn't know the answer. We're just guessing when we said we think he would. He did it. We'll see how it ends up playing out, but you'll have to find something new now. But there's a lot more intrigue to this team than there has been in a while at this point in a year, which that's a nice thing for fans, media, players, coaches, and everyone alike, to say the least.